I've made several videos about how I've been using 3D printing to make my own jumbo versions of vintage Kenner figures like these, including this jumbo Jabba the Hutt. Of course, I got the inspiration to do this from Gentle Giant's line of jumbo figures. That's what these other ones are. But like Jabba, it seems like there are a lot of characters that Gentle Giant is just never going to get around to making. So I decided to take it upon myself to make the characters that I wanted myself. So I've been wanting to add some members of the Max Rebo Band for some time, but there haven't actually been any scans of the Max Rebo Band figures until now, and without a scan, I'm limited with what I can actually do. If you've been watching the channel for a while, you'll know that I often use models from Desert Octopus. He's the one who sort of scanned a lot of the initial Kenner figures that I've been using, including Jabba. But it seems that recently he's been working more on making his own original figures, and he's got some great ones like you see on the screen right now. But he hasn't been doing so much in the way of just scanning Kenner figures like he had in the past, and so it didn't seem very likely that he'd be doing a Rebo Band anytime soon. But luckily someone else has been scanning Kenner figures recently, and that is none other than Funky Maclunkey. You may recognize the name, has come up on the channel a few times in the past, but he has started scanning vintage Kenner figures, and many of them are kind of high up on my want list, so that's great. Specifically, we have Sy Snootles, the singer for the Max Rebo Band, and I immediately purchased this and set about trying to print it at jumbo scale. These are the models that you get, and at first glance they look pretty good, although if you look very closely you'll see that the details are a bit on the soft side. Now I think if you're printing this off at sort of normal 3 3/4 inch scale, it might be okay, but if you're going to blow it up to 12-inch scale, this just won't cut it. So I took each of the parts into Nomad Sculpt on my iPad Pro using the Apple Pencil, and I sort of added in all of the details that were missing. Now, of course, to some degree, I am creating this from scratch. It's my own interpretation of what it should be, but I was referring to the original vintage figure while I did this. This worked relatively well. It's basically just a matter of using the crease tool and going in and trying to make the details more obvious, although I did have to increase the resolution of the scan, essentially, in order to prevent this kind of wrinkling effect that you can see there. On the skirt in particular, I added a lot of detail because it was all very soft, but to be fair, the skirt is very tiny and very thin. That detail is going to be incredibly difficult to capture with a scanner, so I don't blame Funky Maclunkey for this at all, but I still wanted to make it look a little bit better at a larger scale. So just to give you a quick comparison of a couple of these pieces, you can see the added detail in the skirt here, and also on the body. It's not quite as dramatic of a difference here, but trust me, you can really tell the difference if you blow this up to 12-inch scale. Also, you'll notice that I remove these holes that he uses for his articulation because I'm going to be adding in magnetic articulation. So here's a quick comparison between the original unmodified model and the one that I added the detail to and then scaled up by about 320% to hopefully get it to the right size. And I also, as you can see here, added little slots for rare earth magnets to be inserted for the articulation. So all that I needed to do at this point was to print it off on my Elegoo Saturn II Resin 3D printer. Before we look at the printed figure, though, I have one quick request to make of you, and that is that you click the like button on this video and also subscribe if you're not already subscribed. I'm trying to grow this channel a little bit more than I have been, and that would be extremely helpful. I really appreciate it. So here is Sy Snootles all printed in the jumbo scale. And I've used also magnetic articulation at all of the joints. So you can see we can move her arms up and down, and her legs move as well. These are just rare earth magnets that I've embedded in the print. So yeah, this is turning out pretty well. I would say the legs don't quite stand exactly straight, depending on how you have them arranged. It can sort of have her tilting to one side, but that's just the way this has been sculpted, I think. One thing, though, that we do need to worry about is her skirt. Can't just have her standing there naked like this. I did try printing the skirt itself in the same resin. This is the Elegoo ABS-like resin, so it does have a little bit of give, but it's pretty rigid. And I just could not get this to go on, at least not with her legs attached. There wasn't enough room to kind of get them up in there, given the way that the body has been sculpted. So I tried printing it again at a larger size. This is probably like, I don't know, I can't remember what I did exactly, 5 to 10% bigger. But this also didn't really work, and as I was trying to get it on there, kind of force it, it broke open, and I had to take some putty and fix that. But basically, I decided that this was not going to work. Although I will say, the additional detail here that I have added in Nomad Sculpt, I think turned out really nice. So I'm happy with that aspect of it. Anyway, I decided that this would be a good opportunity to finally use some flexible filament, flexible resin that I have been sort of waiting on, trying to find a decent project for a long time. One problem with flexible resin is that it is rather hard to print with, so I kind of wanted to use it for something that made it worthwhile. Anyway, I did try that. It took several tries to get a successful print with the flexible resin. This is the Resi1 or Resion flexible resin that they sent to me quite some time ago. It was originally white resin, but I used some pigments to make it brown. I think it was really actually turned out nice. I had to mix several colors to get this shade of brown. And as you can see, it is flexible. However, after I had put it on the figure, and it seemed to be working fine, I found that I came back a few days later and it had kind of broken open like this on one side. When I went back and read the details of the resin on the Resi1 website, I found that they actually mentioned something along those lines that this could happen. So I guess it wasn't good to sort of put it under strain right away. But I don't think it's that big of a deal, because I can actually use this to put it on the figure more easily once I've painted it, and I'll just glue it on the side here, and I think it'll be just fine. So I would say this is a pretty decent success. Difficult to print with. As I say, I had to do several versions, and I kind of had to, I printed it like this, upside down, and I had to use supports that were very strongly adhered, so it's a little rough here. I had to cut it off with some nippers. But overall, I think it will look pretty darn good. And I think maybe as a finishing touch, I will spray this with a little bit of a gloss coat to kind of make it look a little bit more like glossy plastic. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with this. So really, the only step now is to paint her. And also, I'm going to be printing a microphone with stand that Funky Maclunkey has made available kind of afterwards, after I had started this project. He kind of added that to the listing, so I have that as well. So I've got the figure here primed white and in a kind of makeshift spray booth that I made out of a cardboard box. And the idea is to, of course, just get it to look more or less like this. First step is going to be to replicate her kind of light yellow skin. So I'm going to be using Army Painter War Paints. These are specially made for airbrushing, already pre-thinned and everything. I'm going to be combining Demonic Yellow and Matte White. So I've got the paint job mostly finished here. Well, I guess it is finished. I'm just not 100% satisfied with how everything turned out. Like the spots here, the edges of them are a little bit more diffuse or indistinct than I had actually wanted them to be. I was having some trouble with my airbrush. I'm not entirely sure what the deal was, but overall I think it looks pretty good. I'm going to take this now and give it a blast of crystal clear enamel spray just to kind of protect it, but also to give it just a little bit more of a plasticky look instead of a matte painted look. And then we'll try and put on her skirt and also finish up the microphone, and then we should be done. And here we have the completed figure. This, of course, is with the crystal clear enamel spray on it. I really do think that helps the look overall, especially it looks better on the skirt here. We can take a look at her a little bit more closely. Of course, we've got the articulation there with the magnets, and also on the feet. One reason I wanted to use this flexible skirt is because if you have a rigid skirt here, it's very difficult to move these feet at all, even if they are articulated. And I think this does help. You can see how flexible this is. I did have one issue with the skirt, though, and that was when I went to put it back on. I mentioned that it had broken, and it turned out it was actually too small to go back on. I couldn't get the pieces to fit together. There was about this much of a gap. I'm not entirely sure how to explain that, except to say that probably it shrunk during the curing process, and that's why it broke off in the first place. Since this was rather challenging to print, I didn't want to try and print it again, and I didn't even know how to fix the problem, really, how I would modify it. So I just went ahead and added a little extension here using some green putty and then painted it. It doesn't look fantastic if you look at it too closely, but it doesn't really stand out that much if you're not aware of it. So I think it's fine. So pretty happy overall with how she turned out, I think. I also printed her microphone. This is just that model that Funky Maclunkey added later on. Not a lot to say about it, although it did take up the entire vertical volume of the Elegoo Saturn II, so it took quite some time to print, actually. One thing I do like about it, though, I printed it solid, so it's kind of heavy on the base, and it will stand up just fine on its own. So I can just sort of put it there off to the side or whatever. There we go. Now, we should probably compare this to the original vintage Kenner figure as well. So we've got her and her microphone. Now, the microphones, they had two different versions. There was a black one and a sort of gunmetal silver-colored one. You'd either get silver microphones and a black instrument for a droopy McCool, or the reverse. I like how the silver microphones look, so that's what I went with. It's obviously not an exact match, these two. I probably went a little too yellow on the skin, but I kind of like this better, the little bit yellower look. And this color of the skirt is a bit of a less red-brown, I guess. But it was challenging to mix up the pigments and dye the flexible resin, so I'm pretty happy with how this turned out, actually. The skirt does raise the difficulty level somewhat, though, so keep that in mind if you wanted to do something like this yourself. That's about it for today's video. Here you can see a couple other figures that I've done in the Jumbo Vintage Kenner line. This is, of course, Ula and Gargan, or Yarna. You can see videos that I've made about them also on the channel. Let me know if you'd be interested in seeing other videos in this series. I probably will be making more Jumbo figures just for my own collection, but, if you'd like me to document the process, I can do that. I am a little reluctant to just sort of make the same video over and over again, though, so, when you have something new, in this case, the flexible skirt and so forth, and also the resculpting of the detail, kind of makes it a little bit more interesting, I think. But, yeah, let me know what you think. Thanks very much for watching. This video was brought to you with the help of my patrons from Patreon, including these Palace VIPs, Angelica Brady and Jesper Murtu. I really appreciate all of your support. If you'd like to help support the channel too, go to the link in the video description.